Baby, this week, words of affirmation, speaking our truth, and allowing for our voice to be heard, especially when it comes to expressing where we're at, but also information exchange, asking questions and receiving information. All of these modes of communication will be very potently, energetically supported and felt this week. Mainly because we see that Mercury will be joining Venus, the Sun, the Moon, Jupiter in the sign of Gemini. This sign that is ruled by Mercury and is all about information exchange, communication, and all of those things. So this week is definitely going to be one where it's going to be less likely for there to be miscommunication, but more likely for us to be able to more easily understand where people are coming from if they choose to express it, but also finding the answers that we seek, really following our curiosities. Hello, friends. It's your girl, Alina, and welcome back for my weekly horoscope. So we will be talking about the week ahead of June 3rd to the 9th. By the way, it's the beginning of June. Crazy. We are halfway through the year. Bizarre. In my opinion, anyway. I just feel like this year is going by a little too quickly. So before we dive in, I just want to let you know that the Aurline retreat is quickly approaching, though tickets are closed. I just wanted to mention that while we are gearing up for the retreat to happen, I am also simultaneously planning for our next retreat, the second annual Aurline retreat. Where it will be, when it will be, that is not decided yet, but it will be decided soon based off of you and what you want out of the retreat if you're interested in coming. Now, while I'm planning, I want to know what you want to do, when you want to go on this retreat, what time of year works for you, what is your budget, what is your preferred country or location, destination for us to come together as astrology, spiritual growth loving geeks and geek out together and go on an adventure in a foreign country. You can let me know by clicking the link in the description box below. It's like a 2-minute survey to let me know what you think. So if you're interested in joining me on a retreat, then be sure to sign up for that. Also, this first full week of June, we have a Gemini new moon. Now, at the time of this being uploaded, I already have a video out diving even deeper into this Gemini new moon. So if you want to learn even more about it and go even deeper than what I'm going to cover in this weekly overview, then be sure to check out that video. But with that said, let's dive in. So first up, on Monday, June 3rd, we first want to set the stage by backing up a bit to June 2nd, where we saw that the moon entered Taurus. So on Monday, the moon will be in Taurus, and that really imbues the day and the following day with this air of support around relaxation, around really drawing your energy back to yourself and kind of feeling and seeking more stability when it comes to your inner world, your emotions, and your intuition. And so if that means kind of like pulling away and kind of getting more clear on where you're at internally, that can be very helpful on Monday, especially because we know that Monday is Moon Day. It's ruled by the moon. So whatever state the moon is in, will likely be feeling it a little bit more potently. The energy is a lot more receptive if you want to work with the moon on that day as well. But also on Monday, the 3rd, we see that Mercury will be entering its home sign of Gemini. Now, as many of y'all might already know, Mercury is the planet that rules over our communication, our information exchange, learning. You might already know some Geminis. Mercury is the ruling planet of Gemini. Geminis that love devouring information, love sharing it, love teaching it. They always have like a quick, clever joke to give because they love just like sharing little sparks of insight and jokes with people. But when we see that Mercury enters the sign of Gemini, which it'll be transiting Gemini for the next 2 weeks, it imbues these next 2 weeks with it being a lot easier for us to get our ideas across, easier for us to process information, and also a lot easier for us to access information. So if you're somebody who's been really curious about something, you've been wanting to dive deeper into it, do a deep dive sort of research, maybe utilizing Google or even say ChatGPT. I've had very interesting and insightful conversations with ChatGPT as if it's this all-knowing oracle when it comes to information. And this can be a great time, very fruitful, to follow your curiosities, follow those insights and those ideas to see where they lead you to. Also, over the next 2 weeks, you might notice a lot more chattiness, a lot more maybe even invitations to go places or people reaching out to you, even gossip. And gossip, not just in like the morally and socially looked down upon form of gossip, where it's like people are maybe lying or trying to tear down others in like a negative way. Gossip in terms of you learning new insights about people that you didn't know before, some truths coming to the surface, like you hearing like, oh, did you hear so and so did this? And it's not necessarily a negative thing. Sometimes it's like they did this awesome thing, or did you know that so and so is moving? Bits of information start popping up a lot more easily over the next 2 weeks, with Mercury being in its home sign, where it can most easily imbue its energy onto us. Next up, June 4th is Tuesday. We know that Tuesday is ruled by Mars, the planet of action, aggression, passion, and desire. It's considered the planet of war as well, because it's so heavily tied to our action and our more fiery emotion. So again, think of passion, desire, anger, things like that. For that reason, it makes Tuesdays in general really great days to just be in action, to get into action, to implement things, because it rules over that action-oriented aspect of our lives. But with that said, we see that Mercury in Gemini will be trining with Pluto, which is currently retrograde, and that is also in Aquarius. So when we see this type of transit, it can basically bring about very revealing conversations. So really adding to the already very insightful energy that Mercury in Gemini already imbues. It's really amplifying what I mentioned before about even potential gossip. Very revealing conversations can come about. And I say that because, very simplistically, Mars rules over conversations and information. Pluto rules over revealing the hidden aspects of things, the shadow aspect of things, the things that we kind of brush under the rug, things that maybe we don't even realize unconsciously trigger us sometimes, or past traumas, things that are uncomfortable that maybe we want to like put to the side, or things that are not socially acceptable almost. In general, when we see that Pluto is retrograde, that takes all of those themes and it makes it a lot more internal. It's not so much like, ooh, these are things that are being revealed about the world, like, and now I know, like, or about these people. A lot of times it's revealing things that are coming up within ourselves. And so on Tuesday, when we see such a potent transit involving Mercury, the planet of information, conversations, talking, things like that, in Gemini, this very communicative sign already, coming together with Pluto, the planet of these hidden truths and things like that, what it can do is it can make it a lot more likely for us to have experiences that cause us to kind of revisit past experiences, maybe past traumas, past situations that maybe we either thought were resolved or we knew they were resolved, but we were like ready to move on with. We might feel the need to finally talk about them. Or you might notice that with others, where they finally feel the need, like you can sense there's something bubbling to the surface. There's a lot of unspoken energy kind of like coming to the surface. And on this day, on Tuesday, the 4th, you might notice that these conversations are happening. And it's going to be through these conversations, even like think of investigative work, investigative research, doing a deep dive. Think about like maybe you hear an insight about people or a situation and you're like, let me learn more. What's going on here? And you're doing a deeper dive into that situation. And it likely might involve something hidden, or maybe not hidden, but things that we don't want to talk about. You know what I mean? Those type of things. They're coming to the surface throughout this week, really, because it involves the slower moving planet of Pluto. So this will be felt for a few days. But ultimately, it's going to be through talking about it. It's going to be through research, through these elements, these mercurial aspects, that these insights will be coming about. This transit also can make it really good to have like negotiations, debates, these more pointed conversations, because they can be very revealing in a lot of ways. So if you're interested, don't be afraid to look into that. And also on Tuesday, all the Gemini transits. So we have Mercury conjuncting Jupiter in Gemini. So when we see that happens, Jupiter really comes in and really amplifies and imbues predominantly benefic energy onto mercurial aspects of our lives. So it expands it. So what does that mean? That means that it can make it so we can come up with really brilliant ideas, really interesting, innovative, oftentimes, ideas when we follow our curiosities. And it can also bring a lot of socialization. And that socialization aspect will definitely be amplified because also on Tuesday, we see that the Sun in Gemini will be conjuncting with Venus in Gemini. And you know, Venus is all about love and relationships. The Sun is all about our ego, our perspective of ourselves, how we sort of approach the world, what we kind of radiate out to the world in terms of our identity and who we are. So on Tuesday, there will likely be some interesting information coming about, a lot of socializing, a lot of conversation, likely gossip. And again, this is likely going to be felt throughout the week because Pluto, which is involved, slower moving planet, and a lot of it is going to be just a lot more talking, a lot of socializing. And then also it'll feel a little bit easier to be charming. You might interact with people who are a bit more charming as well, but a lot more conversations are happening. You might notice that you might be invited to something, or maybe you're on like a group call, or something happens at work where there's like a meeting and there's a lot of ideas being floated around. Very social on Tuesday. Next up on Wednesday, we see that Wednesday is ruled by Mercury. So this is a great day for socializing. You see what I told you? This week is all about socializing, connecting, just learning all of these things that of Gemini. So it's really also great for intellectual pursuits. So think about researching, think about reaching out to people to ask for help or to network in some way, to be like, hey, I heard that you know so-and-so, and maybe can you connect me? Can you give me their number? Or like, I heard that you worked with this person. What was it like doing that? Seeking, receiving, asking for, and giving information is very benefic, very energetically supported on Wednesday. We also see that the moon will be entering the sign of Gemini, leaving Taurus and going into Gemini on Wednesday. And as many of y'all know, Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So this will be very potently felt on Wednesday for that reason. And it makes it a great day for things like communication, networking, learning, all of these things, really amplifying the already present themes of Wednesday because it's already ruled by Mercury. This type of transit of the moon being in Mercury can make us a lot more curious. It can make us sort of almost like crave intellectual pursuits in a lot of ways, like intellectually stimulating conversations. That might be in debate. What comes to mind is also acting. So this is the thing, y'all. I just want to say this about myself. I have a lot of Gemini placements. I love intellectually stimulating anything. That's my love language. Look, I'm going crazy and feral for it right now. But think about like acting where you're put on the spot. You gotta think with your mind real quick. Think about debate, think about negotiations, think about friendly sort of disagreements where it's like, it's not an argument, but you don't agree. And you're kind of going back and forth about it. Like that sweet spot where you're not angry or upset, but you're kind of like, but what about this part? Oh, did you consider that? And like kind of bouncing ideas off of one another in that way. The next few days when the moon is in Gemini, it feels a lot easier to kind of get into that energy and that vibration. You might notice that happening a bit more often. Next up on Thursday, which is a very lucky day because it is ruled by Jupiter, the planet of luck and expansion. Thursday can be a great day for things like growth, abundance. And what I mean by that is like being optimistic and open-minded for anything to happen. Because Jupiter can be very expansive in that way, just being open-minded. And Jupiter is playing a pretty notable role today because on this day, June 6th, we have a new moon in Gemini. And not only is the sun and moon in Gemini, along with Venus, but also Jupiter and Mercury, okay? So there's a lot of energy when it comes to Gemini. And it'll be very helpful for you to look at what house is being activated during this new moon, because we have the planet of expansion, the planet of love, the planet of information exchange, the astral body, that being the moon of your inner world and your thinking, the sun, which influences your ego, all putting a lot of energy to a certain part of your chart right now, a certain house. So it'll be very helpful to look into that. Generally speaking, when we have a Gemini new moon, it is an optimal time for setting intentions for the new lunar cycle ahead around how you communicate, how you get your ideas across, and your social life. You know, like who do you connect with? Who do you have intellectually stimulating conversations with? Like, you know, think about iron sharpening iron in terms of like the people that you're around that kind of challenge you in a good way for growth when it comes to your thinking and how you process things. These are the type of things that can be very helpful. But also on the day of this Gemini new moon, a few days leading up to and following it as well, I cannot emphasize this enough. Affirmations will be so potent, especially when it comes to manifestation. And what I mean by that is saying out loud that which you are calling into your life, affirming, this is who I am. This is what I'm calling in. This is what I no longer accept and what I'm letting go of. And this is what I do accept. Not just to speak it out and emit those vibrations, literally through sound wave vibrations out into the universe, but also to speak to yourself on a subconscious level, on a deeper level of your psyche through these affirmations that you repeat over. So don't be afraid of doing that. With this lunation being in Gemini, Gemini being ruled by Mercury, Mercury is also in Gemini, knowing what does Mercury rule over, right? It rules over short-term travel as well as information exchange, things out of the internet. So this can also be a great time for exploring, how do you want to travel? Like, where do you want to go? Think about also transportation. There's a lot of good energy when it comes to maybe setting intentions of like, I need a new car. Here are the steps that I'm going to take to get that. Or I want to go on a trip, or I want to travel. Let me think about like, what are some actionable steps to go in that direction? Or let me explore that in my mind. What does that look like for me? These are all things that can be really helpful around this time. Another analogy that I like to give for all of these planets being in Gemini, but namely with this new moon, is maybe this happened to you, or you've experienced it with friends, or maybe you've even seen it represented on TV because it's so common. But you know how after a breakup, you might want to talk about the situation over and over and over again to your friends, to the point that you know, like, oh, I'm probably annoying my friends with how much I talk about my ex. And a part of the reason why you do that is because you are finally ready to process it through articulating and expressing what happened and your thoughts on it. And it's through the act of having to articulate and connect the dots and sort of like reduce things down into words in order to help people understand as you express it. It helps you understand as you're expressing it. So the point of me saying that is, around this time, if you notice that you're like overthinking things, or things kind of keep coming up, don't be afraid to talk about it. Don't be afraid to vent. What's the root meaning of venting? There's this pressure building up. And if you open a vent, you relieve that pressure. Think about the ways that you might be able to relieve pressure, especially with anything that's been like, just sticking around in your head for too long, that you're kind of ready to process. And that doesn't necessarily need to be venting with a friend. That could be venting with a therapist. That could be journaling, anything like that. But just consider that. That can be very helpful around this time. Next up, on Friday, June 7th, we know that Friday is ruled by Venus. So it makes this day a very optimal day for things like romance, dating, and not just from a romantic perspective, but think of any sort of relationship of the heart. So that can be family members, close friends. It's just a very benefic day for connecting with other people. And considering all these planets in Gemini, I'm sure that you will have very insightful conversations around this time for that reason. But also on Friday, we see that the moon will be leaving Gemini and entering the sign of Cancer. Now, when the moon enters its home sign of Cancer, it's very benefic. From an electional astrology perspective, it can actually be a very great day for also intention setting for that reason. But when we see the moon is in Cancer, it's a great day for nurturing how we feel, nurturing our inner world, nurturing our emotions, nurturing ourselves and others, nourishing ourselves. Also focusing on things that have to do with healing emotionally, and also holding space for our intuition and how we're feeling. Because also when the moon is in Cancer, it can feel easier for us to tap into our intuition. It can be pretty heightened over the next few days. All right, next up on Saturday, really overall this weekend, following such a chatty and very mentally stimulating week, the next few days on the weekend are not going to feel the most productive for many of us, because we have a few squares, a bit challenging aspects that kind of suppress a bit of the more mercurial Gemini energy that we have. On Saturday, we know that Saturday is ruled by Saturn, so it's a great day for being in action in alignment with responsibilities that we have, any sort of callings that we might have to grow up or mature, or have a bit of restriction in order to get something done. So Saturday in general can be a great day for chores for that reason, or keeping our promises in a lot of ways. But we see that Venus in Gemini will be squaring Saturn in Pisces. So this is the type of transit that can make it so it doesn't feel very productive on Saturday. And that's because it can feel kind of hard to think about and process things. And I say that because since Venus involves our close relationships, it's in Gemini, it involves aspects of our lives that has to do with communicating with our close loved ones. And then Saturn comes in, and Saturn is a strict teacher. So it's really this planet that's all about asking us to grow, sometimes through not so comfortable situations. And it's in Pisces, which involves heavier aspects of our intuition, our ability to observe, be observant, and things like that, and even our imagination. It makes it so our relationships can end up being under a microscope. There might be some situations where we have to pause and think did I hear that correctly? And you're questioning your perception of things. You're questioning your thinking a little bit when it comes to relationships. There's a bit of confusion on Saturday for that reason. So it wouldn't hurt to pause for a bit, maybe for a few days before making any big decisions with relationships, especially if you feel indecisive or confused. But we also see that Mars, the planet of action, aggression, passion, anger, it's called the planet of war, it'll be entering the sign of Taurus on Saturday. Now, this is the type of transit that can end up making us feel very determined. It can make us feel very energized and focused and very clear when it comes to aligning our actions with tangible results, like tangible, structured outcomes. Because a lot of times, especially when Mars was in Aries, there was just kind of like this unfettered energy where it's like we felt very energized to kind of go in the direction that we wanted. And it's like, oh, I want to do this thing, so I'm going to go do it. Especially in Aries, it can be very selfish as well, because Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It's the youngest sign of the zodiac. It's all about advocating for ourselves, speaking up for our needs. Like, think about a baby when it's born. It's crying and it's like, I need this immediately. I don't care what you think about it. I need your help and I'm going to speak my truth, right? But when Mars, this planet of energy that rules over a lot of our energy and our drive, moves into Taurus, it imbues this energy of us not just thinking about ourselves, but thinking about, okay, we have these epiphanies and these ideas and we know what we need, but how do we stay in action in a sustainable, structured, consistent way? How can we create some balance there as well? Because we're not just considering ourselves, but others as well. It can also help us with sort of playing the long game in terms of like getting clear on action plans in the long term. So it can be very helpful in that way. On Saturday, ruled by Saturn, we have this notable transit involving Saturn squaring with Venus. So there's that aspect of it. And then Mars is coming in and it's changing signs very notably. Again, look at what house has Taurus and you'll see what house Mars is entering. So what house is getting this energy from Mars? That's this more sustained energy for long-term benefit. But especially if you're kind of doing chores and you're being in action, you might notice that there might be some themes of you being called to kind of grow or mature in some way, or like there's these responsibilities coming up. Have heart in knowing that it'll be a bit easier for you to understand as the weeks go on how to approach it in a sustainable way where you don't feel overworked or you're giving too much of your energy, if that makes sense. And finally, on June 9th, we see that it will be Sunday, which is the day ruled by the sun, which is all about leadership, vitality, and having the courage to show up as yourself and really radiate, just like the sun, exactly who you are, unfettered, unfiltered. It can feel a lot easier to hold space for all of you in that way, and also allow for celebration and fully embody what you've grown into. But we see that on Sunday, the sun in Gemini will now be squaring with Saturn in Pisces. So it won't be Venus squaring, but it'll now be the sun squaring with Saturn. And for the same reason that it's squaring with Saturn, it's going to feel a little bit harder to be in action. It's going to feel a little harder to assert our will, kind of like express how we want to express. We're going to feel a little bit more tired. It might be a little bit harder to complete our to-do list. And we might also notice that we might be a little bit more critical of ourselves, like our ego. Because, we see the sun rules over our ego and our sense of self. And it's having this challenging aspect with Saturn, which is considered the strict teacher. And it's the type of transit that can usher in experiences where we might notice I'm not showing up the way that I've been wanting to show up. I've been procrastinating or I've been avoidant of something that I know that I need to do that would be helpful for my growth, but I'm just not feeling good about it. And my advice to you is don't be too hard on yourself. Just don't be too hard on yourself, because oftentimes it's when we're too hard on ourselves that actually is one of the main reasons why we aren't in action, because we kind of feed into this identity of us not being enough because we aren't showing up perfectly. And the thing about growing into who we need to be, it has nothing to do with perfection. Perfection is really this dream of the ego. And it also helps us sometimes, I feel like, on a subconscious level to avoid even being in action, because it's like, you know what, I'm not even going to try because I'm not doing it perfectly. And I just want to remind you that just showing up imperfectly is way better than waiting for the perfect moment or waiting until you magically do it right. And then finally, Sunday, ruled by the sun, we see that the moon enters Leo. So both these transits will be strongly felt because they involve the sun, and then the moon entering Leo. Leo is ruled by the sun. When we see that the moon enters Leo, there can be a lot more inner dialogue around our identity and how we're showing up, not just for ourselves, but showing up in the world, other people's perception of ourselves, and how we're holding space for our inner world to be expressed. And I say that because, Leo, ruled by the sun, it's this sign of courage. It's this sign that's represented by the lion because of courage. And the lion is associated also with the sun because it's showing up exactly how it is, just very triumphantly radiating these yellow and orange hues and this light in that way. Hi y'all, I ran out of space in my memory card, so I'm gonna finish this video recording on my phone. But I just wanted to say that, yeah, the moon in Leo can be a great time for self-expression, allowing your creative ideas to flow and really holding space for aspects of your psyche without judgment. And that can be aspects of your inner child and things like that. Especially on the weekend, it's a great time for that. With that said, that wraps up my week ahead reading for the week of June 3rd through the 9th. And just a reminder, be sure to fill out the survey that I have linked in the description box if you are seriously interested in joining me for the second annual R-Line retreat. And let me know, what country do you want to go to? What is your price range to make this retreat as affordable as possible for you? What time of the year is most convenient for you? I'd love to hear that. I want to plan with you on this retreat. Also, if you made it to the end of this video, I'd love if you commented 3 sun emojis to let me know that you made it. But with that said, I will leave you with my favorite quote, and that is, be gentle with yourself because life is about the journey, not the destination. All right, peace.